Hey, welcome back to our study called The Everlasting God. And we're in Genesis chapter 22. And today we're specifically, if I could say the word, specifically looking at Genesis 22 through 24. And we're looking at the obviousness of God's blessing upon Abraham. So the story opens with Abraham no longer living in Gerar, but he has moved about 25 miles to the southeast in a place that will be called, in the future, Beersheba. So at some point after the first encounter with Abimelech, Abraham thought it was wise to move from the area. We have to remember that it's not just Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac traveling around, right? Because Ishmael and Hagar are gone. It's not just the three of them in a tent. It's Abraham's a very wealthy man, and he has lots of possessions. He has a massive amount of animals that need pasture land. He also has a large amount of servants to take care of all that stuff. Remember way back when we looking at Lot living with Abraham, and their two households could not be successful. They couldn't successfully operate together as one because they had so much stuff. And so they had to separate. Also remember that back in chapter 14, Abraham had 318 trained men in his house. So by now, that number probably has grown. We don't know exactly, but I'm guarantee you it's probably has grown. He's gotten more servants even from Abimelech. So he has more people in his house. The amount of fighting men available in his household is probably more, I'm guessing. But even 318, that's 318 men that you're traveling around with, okay? Plus, they probably have wives, they have children. You know, so you have these servants that are taking care of all your animals and your tents and all that kind of stuff. So you're really traveling with a small town. You can imagine what kind of issues that might bring when you're a sojourner or someone, or you're just living on someone else's land. You know, he doesn't own land. He's living on someone else's properties, or he's out there in the wilderness. So you can imagine if you're traveling around with this small town, it causes some issues. People take notice when you're in their area. As we'll see, 25 miles is not much space between really two wealthy men at the time. That's not that far for two guys that own a lot of stuff to be living near each other. So we find that here the pagan king of Gerar, along with the commander of his army, Phicol, traveling the 25 miles to go see Abraham. Now, why does he do that? Well, what's the first thing we read Abimelech saying? God is with you in all you do. See, the blessing of God upon Abraham is apparent. It's obvious even to this pagan king. What is interesting is that the same is said of Isaac and the same is said of Jacob as well. James Smith points out that God sometimes blesses his people so visibly, following their efforts and crowning their labors, that their very enemies see it. God was with Abraham and his family, and it was apparent to the people around them. See, God's blessing was upon Abraham and his family, and it traveled around with them. So when Isaac went somewhere, people are like, oh, God is with you. When Jacob shows up, even though Jacob, I'm always perplexed about Jacob, because Jacob is a deceiver, man. He's a class act, right? But even then, the blessing of God was always with him, followed him around. People were like, wow, this guy's blessed. Yep, that's how it was. So God chose to bless them. Remember, it didn't have anything to do with them specifically. It was God's mercy. It was God's grace. It was all about God. Really had little to do with the actual person. So, they were just really the vessel by which God poured his grace and mercy into. So how much does the vessel really, how much credit do they really deserve for the grace and mercy? Very little. You're just holding it. It's not even yours, really. All right, so the blessing is apparent, right? After acknowledging God's blessings upon Abraham, Abimelech asked Abraham to swear that he would act kindly. This word translated as kindly is a word that you find many, many times throughout the Old Testament. It is the word chesed. It's translated as kindness, loving kindness, mercy, goodness, favor, loyalty, devoted, unchanging love. It's all these ideas really wrapped into one. It's a word often used of God and his disposition towards the people in which he has made a covenant. So if he has a covenant relationship with somebody, then he has chesed towards them. It's a merciful, loyal, loving kindness. Okay, there's no like backstabbing or anything else like that. It's upfront. It's like, hey, this is a kindness because of the covenant, and it's not going anywhere. But it's just like it's all these things, these kindnesses all wrapped into one. Now, often with God, his chesed is described as being everlasting, as in 1 Chronicles 16:34, where David says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever." So this is a kind of agreement Abimelech is looking for. He wants a mutual kindness based on a covenantal agreement. He wants to, let's make an oath. Let's swear to each other that we're going to be kind to each other. Now, you got a lot of stuff. You got lots of animals. You got some fighting men. I got my place here. I got lots of stuff. I got lots of fighting men. Let's make an agreement. Let's not fight here. Let's be kind to one another, and let's make this agreement. And what does Abraham say? Yes, let's do it. I swear. So this kind of sets up the next part of the story. And, talking about this covenant, this agreement that Abraham's making with this foreigner, this man who is probably a pagan worshiper, worshiping pagan gods. He's in the land of where the Philistines are going to be. So, that could be a problem. So next time we'll take a look at the verses 25 through 32 and see what happens because of what's going on here.